Welcome to the Chestnut Mound Church of Christ, located in Chestnut Mound, Tennessee. My name is Carver Moore. I'm one of the ministers for the Chestnut Mound congregation, and in the time we have today, I want to ask you a simple question. What do you do when something is missing? Something that may be very valuable to you goes missing. I bet you turn over every inch of your house, every inch of your car, just every inch of everything, looking for that item. Think about when you're putting a puzzle together or putting together a piece of furniture. You get to the end of that task and you discover that there's a piece missing. And the puzzle and the piece of furniture doesn't look right. Do you just let that go? Or do you try to complete it? Do you try to find that missing piece? Friends, you try to find that missing piece, don't you? What about in our spiritual lives? Are there missing pieces in our churches? Think about when you walk into the services. You sit down in the pew, you look in front of you, behind you, on either side of you, and maybe the person that normally sits in one of those spots is missing. What do you do? Do you reach out to that person? We live in a time where it's so easy to reach out to somebody. We can send a text message. We can Facebook them. We can tweet at them. Do we reach out to those people? In Luke chapter number 15, and that's where I want to spend what I like to call the meat and potatoes of our lesson. But in Luke chapter number 15, Jesus provides us with three parables, three illustrations that shows us what we should do when we lose something, not just physically, but also, and most importantly, when we lose something spiritually. So in the time that we have today, I want to look at each of these three parables. I want to look at these people that Jesus uses in these parables, uses to illustrate to us how they sought out what they lost, the why that they sought out what they lost, and I also want to look at their response. And you might be surprised at some of these. So number one, we have the parable of the lost sheep. Let me remind you, friends, that these parables are being addressed to the Pharisees. So the Pharisees, if you're not familiar with them, they are Jesus' biggest critics. They're always, we see throughout all four Gospels, the Pharisees are always there with some quick, some snarky response to anything and everything that Jesus teaches or preaches. They want to disprove him. They're jealous of him. But these parables, keep in mind, they're written to the Pharisees. And he wants them to understand, and us today, to understand that every soul is valuable, not just a few. So go back to what I said about that missing person. When you enter church, when you come into church and you sit down and somebody's missing, the soul is valuable and you need to reach out to them. And Jesus is getting ready to give us the why for that. So the first parable, like I said, is the parable of the lost sheep. And here Jesus uses the illustration of a sheep and their herder. So likewise, John chapter number 10 tells us that we are the sheep and Jesus is the great shepherd. So there again, here we see this illustration. And friends, remember, livestock like sheep, cattle, was very valuable. It was considered to some people more valuable than money. And he asks them a really powerful question. Look with me at verse 4 of Luke chapter number 15. Verse number 4 says, "What man of you, having 100 sheep, if he loses one of them, does not leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the one which is lost until he finds it?" Listen to that again. Until he finds it. You search for something until you find it. Think about that lost piece of that puzzle you were working on. Think about that lost piece of that piece of furniture you were trying to put together. You're going to search for that thing until you find it. This man searched for this lost sheep until he found it. Likewise, when somebody is missing from our services, we should search for that person until we find them. And Jesus goes to show us that, well, this man has already got 99 left. What's one? But friends, one soul is valuable. One soul is worthy of our time and our attention. Notice the reaction of this man and of God's when he finds the sheep. Verse 5 and 6, it says, when he has found it, he lays it on his shoulders rejoicing. And when he comes home, he calls together his friends and neighbors, saying to them, rejoice with me. Now listen to this. Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep, which was lost. Friends, do we rejoice over one lost soul coming back? Do we rejoice when somebody that has been absent from the services for some reason, be it illness, be it a death in the family, comes back to us? What is our response? Friends, each soul, and I'm going to sound like a broken record throughout this lesson, but friends, each soul, each and every soul is very valuable. Just like these sheep were to this man. And friends, I'm going to tell you something I'm guilty of. As a preacher, and I know other preachers feel the same way, we get so caught up in the numbers game. How many people we can get into our services. But I want you to look at verse 7. Verse 7 makes a really good point here. It says, I say to you that likewise there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner, now are you listening? Over one sinner who repents than over 99 just persons who need no repentance. Friends, what does that mean? If all we do as a preacher, as members, as individual members, you're preachers too, as individual members, if all we do is bring back one soul, well, friends, we've done a good day's work. Think about that. It's not about the numbers. It's just about saving one soul. Number 2, Jesus also gives us the parable of the lost coin. And notice, I want you to notice how Jesus is using valuable items, valuable material items to make his point. Why would he do this? Well, the Pharisees were very materialistic people. He had to get their attention in some way. And so in verse 8 of Matthew chapter number 15, we're told that this woman has 10 silver coins. And these silver coins was the currency of the Jewish people. That's how they bought things. And in verse 8, we see that this woman has the same response that each of us would have. Verse 8 says, or what woman having 10 silver coins, if she loses one coin, does not light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? That sounds like what we do when we lose something. Think about the most valuable thing that you own. It could be a piece of jewelry. It could be your car. Think about the most valuable thing that you own. A few years ago, Vanderbilt baseball replaced the turf on their baseball field. And they took the old turf and they sold individual squares that they ended up framing. And I probably paid a little bit more than I should have for it. But just a little square piece of turf, I made the decision to purchase one of those. And it's very valuable to me. And if I lost that, I would have the same response as this woman would. But what about, and this is what Jesus is trying to get us to realize, what about in our spiritual life? What about when things go missing in our spiritual lives? Do we search? Do we light a lamp? Do we sweep the house? Basically, this woman was basically turning her house upside down to find one silver coin, when in reality, most people would say, well, you've already got 9. Same thing with the shepherd, you've only got 99. You know, if we played the numbers game, one person goes missing from our service, well, you say, well, we've still got 99. We've still got 14. In the case at Chestnut Mound, one person. We need to seek out one person because their soul is valuable. We need to go to the lengths this lady did to find them spiritually. And look at her response there in verse number 9. It says, and when she has found it, she calls her friends and neighbors together, saying, rejoice with me, for I have found the piece which I lost. Do we do that? When somebody comes forward, when somebody responds to an invitation and is either restored or is baptized for the remission of their sins, do we go out and tell people about that? Or do we just brush that off? Oh, she had that response over one silver coin. Surely we can have that response over one lost soul making the decision to come back to us. Think about that, friends, as we continue this. Number 3, we read of the parable of the prodigal son. Once again, Jesus gives us an illustration of something valuable going missing. And in this case, it's a child. Think about how you feel about your children. I'm not a father. I don't know if I'll ever be a father. But I imagine that as a father, I would not want my son or my daughter to go missing or to be wayward. In Psalm chapter number 127 and verse number 3, we're told that children are a heritage from the Lord, meaning that they are the most valuable things that we can have here on this earth. It is a great responsibility to have children, to raise them, to rear them, to follow the gospel of Christ. And we see here that this young man wanted to make a go of life on his own. He thought that life would be better if he just shook the dust off of the town he was living in and went somewhere else. So what does he do? Well, look with me at verse number 12. It says, and the younger of them said to his father, give me the portion of goods that falls to me. So he divided them to his livelihood. We see that this young man took his inheritance and all his worldly goods and left home. His brother stays behind. So now you might be thinking, some might think, well, father's doing pretty good. He lost one son, but he's still got one son. This is not the case. Now let's look what happens to him in verse 13 and 14. It says, and not many days after the younger son gathered all together, journeyed to a far country, and there, now are you listening, wasted his possessions with prodigal living. But when he had spent all there, arose a severe famine in that land, and he began to be in want. So what did he do? He did what most young people do today. He got a little bit of money. He had all these worldly goods, these worldly possessions, and he goes to a far country, and he blows it all. We see that all the time today, don't we? You know, you send a child off to college, and in a week's time, they might be calling mom and dad and saying, hey, can you send me a little money? I spent all my money on food. That's what happens to this young man. And in verse 15 and 16, we see that this young man truly hits what we might call rock bottom. Look at verse 15 and 16. It says, then he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him into the fields to feed swine. And he would gladly have filled his stomach with the pods that the swine ate, and no one gave him anything. What does he do? He hits rock bottom so much, he becomes desperate for any kind of money, any kind of food. He begins working with a stranger's pigs. And pretty soon, he gets so desperate that he begins to eat with them. Eat with the pigs. Now, friends, I don't know if you can get any more rock bottom than that. But all's not lost for this young man. In verses 17 and 18, we read that he comes to his senses. He finally realizes that he had it pretty good back with his father. And in verse number 17, it says, "But when he came to himself, he said, 'How many of my father's hired servants have bread enough and to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you.'" Does that sound like somebody that was once a member of the church, but has fallen away, but then decides to come back and make their life right, be restored to the church? Sometimes it takes hitting rock bottom to realize that you need to get right with God. And that's what that young man did. I'm sure you know the rest of the story. The young man gathers himself together. He returns home. And we see that the father is rejoicing. He runs to meet him. And then he kills the fatted calf, and he throws a party, throws a banquet for his prodigal son. But that's not the end of the story. Because remember, the prodigal son had an older brother that chose to stay home. And this older brother, we see in verses 25 through 32, we see that this older brother begins to develop feelings of jealousy because he feels like his dad should be punishing his younger brother, not rejoicing. I want you to look with me at verse number 29. It says, "So he answered and said to his father, Lo, these many years I have been serving you. I never transgressed your commandment at any time, and yet you never gave me a young goat that I might make merry with my friends." This young man said, "I've been with you for years and years and years and years, and you've never treated me this way." But look at the father's response, verse 30. Really good response here. But as soon as this son of yours came, who has devoured your livelihood with harlots, you killed the fatted calf for him. And he said to him, Son, you are always with me, and all that I have is yours. It was right that we should make merry and be glad, for your brother was dead and is alive again. And now listen to this. And was lost and is found. Think about our churches today. You know, we're thankful. We're so very thankful for those members that are there each and every time the doors are opened. But when those people that are lost come and are restored, or come and have their sins washed away in that watery grave of baptism, we should rejoice together for them. And we should welcome them back into the fold. We shouldn't be jealous of the attention that those people receive, because, friends, that attention is extremely warranted. Number 4. How's this relevant for us? You might be thinking, well, preacher, why are you telling me all this stuff? What, this happened thousands of years ago. This was written to the Pharisees. I'm not a Pharisee. Well, friends, it's relevant for us. It shows us how valuable a soul is. And it shows us that when someone is lost in sin, we've got to seek that person out. We've seen 3 examples of people losing something, and all 3 times they've searched frantically for them. They haven't stopped searching, friends, until they found them. Can you say that you do this? Or can you only say that you do that, you search frantically for things that are of material value? Friends, I'm here to tell you right now, there is nothing more valuable than our souls. Look with me at Matthew chapter number 19 and verse number 26. Matthew chapter number 19 and verse number 26. Matthew 19 Matthew 16, in verse number 26. Matthew 16, verse number 26. It says, "For what profit is it to a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul?" Friends, our souls are the most valuable things that we have. They're more valuable than any amount of money we can ever have in our bank account. We also, friends, need to remember that sometimes we must hit rock bottom in order to get back up. Think about the prodigal son. He thought he knew everything. He thought he was entitled to be out on his own. Sometimes, friends, we catch ourselves thinking that things are going to be better outside the church. Sometimes we think that we're too good for the church. Sometimes we want to go someplace and worship where we can be entertained, where we can be told that what we're doing, the way that we're living our life, is right and right all the time. We think we're entitled to that. We want social status. But as Romans 12 and verse number 12 says, we must avoid these worldly things. Turn over there with me. Romans chapter number 12 and verse number 2. It says, "And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God." And also, friends, for those that remain faithful, when someone comes back to us, don't be jealous. Don't be jealous of the attention that they receive. Rejoice with that person because you're lucky enough, you've been lucky enough to remain faithful. You've been lucky enough to not have to be searched out. So count your blessings in that regard. But don't be jealous of that person. Did you know, friends, that we're all trying to get to the same place? So what is there to be jealous for? Instead of having the same attitude that the older brother did, we instead need to have the attitude the sheep herder and the woman with the coin did. One soul saved, friends, might not seem like much, but to God, it's everything. Look at 1 Timothy chapter number 2 and verse number 4. 1 Timothy 2 and verse number 4. 1 Timothy chapter number 2 and verse number 4. It says, "Who desires all men to be saved and to come to the knowledge of the truth." God wants everybody to be saved. He doesn't want any soul to be lost. That should be our attitude as Christians today. So, a few more thoughts as we close. At Chestnut Mound, when we notice when someone is missing, or wherever you worship, when you notice that someone is missing, it's imperative that you seek that person out, that we seek that person out. I want you also to really pay attention to the people that sit around you. We can't allow anyone to fall through the cracks. And if we do, friends, we risk a soul being lost. We must treat each other as the most valuable things on this earth. More valuable than any material possession that we might have or we might ever have. No matter if you're trying to put a puzzle together or if you're trying to put together a piece of furniture and a piece is missing, it wouldn't look right. Likewise, the church doesn't look the same with pieces missing. Let's make finding missing pieces a theme for this new year. I'm sure everybody can find at least one missing piece. One person that used to attend the services of the church you attend, whether it be at Chestnut Mound or somewhere else. Go make an effort to find those people. Friends, thank you so much for watching. I hope that this message has been encouraging to you, been uplifting to you. We ask that if you have a need, a spiritual need, that you don't hesitate to reach out to us here at the Chestnut Mound Church of Christ, located at 545 Pea Ridge Road in Chestnut Mound, Tennessee. We also ask that if you live far away from the Chestnut Mound Church of Christ, if you live in another area, we encourage you to reach out to the Church of Christ in your area. They would love to see you. They would love to welcome you into their services. They would love to sit down with you and answer any spiritual question that you might have. Friends, thank you so much for watching. Take care, and may God bless you.